All right. Well, there it is. Credits. Yeah, I'm kind of confused. Are they trying to imply that Keats is her father? Or or something? Like it's very strange. You just remember that Cecilia drew a picture of how Herve would look grown up, and they talked about him being a writer. But other than that, you don't get it. Yeah, like I said in the Discord, I don't see how Keats could be Herve, because Keats meets Herve in the Netherworld. And Ellen meets Keats in the Netherworld as well. So that confuses me. And like, how does Keats grow up when he's dead? Like, his parents know he's dead. The doctor knows he's dead. Like, everybody knows he's dead. So yeah, I'm definitely very confused. Did he grow up in the Netherworld? I don't know how that's possible. Levane lived in the Netherworld for 5,000 years and doesn't look like she's has aged 5,000 years. So it doesn't really seem to correlate that Herve would also grow up, I guess. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what they are trying to convey with that. And whatever. Whatever. Anyways, Folklore has been conquered. Aw, yeah. I have some thoughts written down. Probably not as much as I would like, but you know, we'll go through it. For overall thoughts, first up, this was a viewer requested game by Kylor11. So thank you very much, Kylor, for the recommendation. Also, usually when I do my thoughts for games, I like to give my overall thoughts first, because I tend to dislike having to wait until the end of something to get the conclusion of something. I feel like people could get that in the front, and then, you know, if they want to keep going through the rest of it, they can. And so that's typically how I approach things. But I do feel like this is one of those games where doing the reverse of that would actually be beneficial, in that, like, I give my thoughts about the various aspects of the game, and then that all coalesces into like how I feel about it. I'm still going to do it my normal way, but this was one of the games where that kind of made me question how I would talk about it. But my overall thoughts for this game, I was sort of kind of on board with it, and then it swapped over to Keats, and then it kind of lost me. And I think a lot of games do this in this particular way, and so it's not necessarily unique to this game, but I don't like narratives where there are two separate sides of the same story, and they're both doing effectively the same things, going to the same places, interacting with the same characters, and more or less telling the same story just from two separate perspectives. Because 9 times out of 10 for me, that's just not interesting. You know, if Ellen gets one tiny bit of tidbit of information and Keats gets another tiny bit of information, like the combined effect of those two tiny tidbits of information don't warrant playing two separate characters and doing the same worlds and the same bosses and the same ish dialogue and plot progression and stuff like that. It feels not great to go through because it kind of feels like a waste of time. It's like we could have just had all this information in one character's path. I feel like the music is real loud, but we'll fix it in post. I definitely struggled with that a lot, particularly when it went over to Keats. But I will say that there's definitely an aspect of this game that didn't really capture my attention as much as I would have liked. If we think about this story, it's this mystery of a tragedy that happened 17 years ago, and someone comes back to the area of the tragedy, and then like we try to uncover the mystery of the past as well as like crazy stuff happening in the present. And the result in the end of all of that is just, it doesn't seem very interesting. It wasn't necessarily interesting going through all of the fact-finding stuff, and like a lot of the revelations just weren't all that interesting. And it's a weird thing to happen because this game is going along the fantastical aspect of it. We're going into the netherworld. We're talking to dead people and looking at the dead people's memories and things like that. There's a lot of missed opportunities for, I guess, over the topness. And this game, I feel like it reels everything back so much. And so I didn't really latch on to much for this game. So I guess all in all, my overall thoughts are like, I thought the game was okay at best, I suppose. And like it did what it set out to do. I don't feel that I've come out of this experience being like, yeah, like this story gave me something to think about, or this story like this story was worth going through. Like I'm not saying that like the game or whatever is not worth playing. What I'm trying to convey is that it just like I don't think the payoffs in the game warrant the investigations. And I think that's a huge issue when the payoffs are like your central focus of the game. And that's how I feel about Folklore. Is like you're doing relatively uninteresting things. You're you're talking to relatively uh uninteresting characters, and they're giving you relatively uninteresting dialogue, and like the payoff is, oh, I get this relatively uninteresting revelation. It's just it didn't flow that well for me. Um So yeah, I thought it was okay at best. It's nah. Um, for story, was it satisfying? I'm gonna say no on this one. Um, there's there's some ridiculous things going on in the story. There was a thread that they tugged on that everything that's happening was a dream of Ellen. And I felt like that was going down a very dark path. But it was also probably the most interesting thing that the game uh, brought forth. The unfortunate thing is that they never touched on that ever again, as far as I remember. And so uh, it's just one of those things where it's like I feel like there was some aspects that could have been satisfying but just didn't miss the mark, because again, like the payoffs, they don't land. um and this is a game that's all about payoffs for me. So I didn't really feel that the story was satisfying. Did it feel complete? I'm going to acknowledge that there was an opportunity for me to go back to Doolin and potentially talk to villagers before I did the final battle. Maybe I could have talked to Suzette then and got some answers. That being said, I I don't feel like I I understand that in a story like this, you can't explain every tiny minute detail. But there are just some things that make you wonder what the suckafu is going on. Like the hag, for example. Why is the hag Ellen's mom? And how has Ellen's mom just been running around town killing people and nobody knows a dang thing about it? Where is she hiding? How is she hiding in those places? Nobody knows nothing about that. Like, how is she living? Where is she getting her food? It's crazy. She didn't kill anybody for 17 years and now all of a sudden she's here just killing people? It's confusing. Um this whole ending sequence was just kind of confusing. Uh what's the significance of the picture? Who who is Keats? Why why is he important? What was that conversation between Belgay and him? Like like the ending of the game is certainly a great spot to throw in a little teaser here and there and stuff like that. But maybe I'm just not smart enough to see the correlations and things like that. And I'm totally fine with that being the thing. Maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. Yada yada, this and that. I'm willing to take the blame on that one. But uh, yeah, I feel like they're just lingering things that I want answers to. Suzette killing people. Like, why would she start killing people now of all times? Um, we could have gotten more information on why Regine chose now of all times to enact her plan. Like, I would assume she found out somehow that Ellen was Cecilia, but it would have been kind of cool to get a really nice revelation, see a memory of hers or something like that, where it's like we get to see um, how she came across that information. How was the pacing? I would say the this isn't this one's more of like a build your own pacing. And for me, the pacing was absolutely atrocious because I went through Ellen's story and then I had to basically start all over again um, on prior to starting chapter 6 to then do Keats's story and then go and finish the game. So I basically had to quote unquote beat the game or reach the point of no return and then start the game over and do it again. Um, but if you were to do one chapter for each character at a time, so chapter one, chapter two, then you know your pacing is probably going to be better. But you're still going to be doing the same stuff. So it really is kind of a build your own pacing. And for me, it didn't work because of the way that I played it. Thoughts on the story? Wasn't too interested in the beginning, but my interest definitely increased as the game went on, even if that ramp up wasn't a steep increase. Um, I was certainly curious about this mystery. There was an aspect of creepiness to the game. There was, um, that like mysticism that was inserted into it. And I definitely felt like there was potential to go places. So I definitely felt curious to see where the game would go. I believe the larger issue for me, uh, were the bigger narrative developments that didn't provide much impact. The mystery's framing would lose its luster when characters in the Netherworld would only explain so much, and characters in Doolin would say even less. Then those characters started dying, and it just felt like there wasn't any atmosphere or buildup. Um, so I don't tend to watch too many mysteries or spooky game or spooky medias out there and stuff like that. But I feel like one of the best or one of the things that people like about those is the suspense and building up to a suspenseful moment. And maybe that wasn't the target for this game, but I feel like that's what the game was trying to do, but never gave uh, moments that chance to build up. So it's kind of like someone dies. Okay, well let's find out, what happened to it. And then it just like you immediately go to, dungeon that basically has nothing to do with suspense and then you find out what happened. And there's not enough build up or ramp. There's some things that correlate, but you only find some of those things on different paths and it doesn't always like match where you want those things to line up properly. So it 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 I think it just needed to simplify things and then spend more time on the setup, the rising, I guess, action, if you want to call it that, and then, the suspenseful payoff or the big moment of suspense and then the payoff after that, perhaps. Before I move on to the next section, no, the Otter thinks it's a meh game, kind of overrated. I I will definitely say that I have heard nothing about this game before it was recommended, and um, I didn't know anything about the game until uh, Kylo 11 told me a little bit about it, and I, did some research before I went to go purchase it. That being said, I'm not much of an overrated slash underrated person. I try to shy away from those terms a lot because um, I think I mentioned this in like someplace. Um, If you say something is overrated, you're 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 kind of downplaying the significance of like why people like it. You're basically saying that like this game is not as good as people think it is, and I I think that I think that is ultimately the wrong approach on trying to deliver an opinion on the game, because you never want to put down other people's opinions. You want to leave their opinions alone and, just state your own opinions. So I definitely try to say, or try not to say things are overrated or underrated. Um, because, on the other side, if something is underrated, uh, you know, most of the time, those things are just rated correctly. Uh, Not a lot of people played it. Why didn't people play it? Is it obscure? Did people just not like the game? There's a lot of things that go into that. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that song. I'm glad it's over. Like folklore and history, but this game doesn't do anything interesting with it. That is another thing. Um, they did kind of bring in this idea that there would be folklore esque things happening. And I feel like all of that was very surface level. Like, oh, you're in the fairy world. Oh, you're in the other realms of the netherworld. But it just wasn't, um, it wasn't any more in depth than that. And I definitely wish it was, uh, I definitely wish there was a better approach to it. Speaking of this, a thought popped in my head that like the Fairy Lord could have been the final boss, and something that I completely glossed over. Scarecrow being the final boss is very anticlimactic and kind of just one of those out of nowhere type deals. On top of that, Scarecrow being created by Cecilia is like her manifestation of her regrets or fears or whatever is a little ridiculous. Um, like, sure, all of the the signs or all of the building blocks were in place for her, like for this to happen, but it's like uh we just learned at the end, or at least it was alluded to, or at least I interpreted it as Levain was the quote unquote fairy that granted Cecilia's wish. So if that's true, why would Levain create Scarecrow? And why would Scarecrow then betray everybody? It's weird. Very, very weird. Too muddled, too convoluted. It's like Tetsuya Nomura writes. There's lingering things that you want answers to. Sums up every Kingdom Hearts game and how they're written. Yeah. I I would say with Kingdom Hearts, my tagline for it is um it it asks more questions than it answers. And that's how I think of those games. For gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? Just in a general sense, there's a lack of options in this game. There's no way to increase various volumes or decrease various volumes. Dialogue volume was uh, quite low in comparison to everything else. The general audio balance is actually just kind of all over the place too, because there are cutscenes that are just really, really quiet. There are action and fight scenes that are really, really loud. Um, and I there could have been a little bit more choice there, or a little bit more work being done there to make things even out a little bit. No camera controls to make the speed better or to change the direction that it works. And I have a note here that says, actually, there is an option to reverse the camera movement, and I have no idea how I missed that. Yeah, I even made that fix like a stream or two ago. So, I goofed on that part, but um, I do wish that the camera speed was, I guess, faster. And I know that there's a specific reason, like a technical reason, why camera speeds are the way they are for like rendering and things like that. So I do see that that's not always possible to do stuff like that. There's no text speed to have text display quicker or instantly. I'll get into this next point here because it's basically directly related, but I I do wish that I had the ability to progress text because it would make the scenes flow better for me that's playing the game instead of like how the scenes are wanting to play out. Which kind of gets into I don't like the dialogue delivery device that this game has. The comic book panel style is unique and offers something different, but the text progression on its own, until the panel is done, but the text progresses on its own until the panel is done. Then I can press a button to progress to the next panel. There's been many instances where I come across some text and I just can't read it because it goes away before I can even read it. Like I'm not the best reader in the world. I stumble on reading my own words. I stumble on just saying things that are popping into my head. So, I need that extra time to acclimate to the problems that I am facing. And when text progresses on its own, I'm going to miss things. And, it's just going to cause me problems. There's And in my eyes, there's really no reason why text should ever progress on its own unless the scene is specifically built to do that. And you don't have to build scenes that way. But you still can. It's just you don't have to. Cutscenes are a thing. I recognize that. Cutscenes are great. But make sure the volume in those cutscenes are, and cutscenes generally have voice acting too. It's, if you're doing a cutscene and and you're progressing the text on its own, but you don't have voice acting, then I think you goofed. Text can move too quickly for me to read. There are some circumstances where the text will appear and then the screen will immediately start to fade out, making it even more challenging to read. This was also really annoying. Um, it feels like the dialogue could have been intentionally made shorter or punchier to fit in the small dialogue boxes. There were many times where characters could spend more time with their words or explanations and start weaving a better flowing conversation, but don't. So an example of this is like if you go talk to a character, sometimes they'll say, let's just say like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And they'll say like, uh, "I'm doing great." And then the next box comes up, and I wanted to go do this thing, and it's like you could have just made a bigger text box for that, or you could have just had those characters say more words. There's some instances where, at least in my opinion, there are lines of dialogue that um are written like very short and concise when they could be expanded on, and characters could have a few lines or like a full multi-word sentence instead of, just like 5 or 6 words. Maybe like 10 or 12 words. Something crazy. Um, so uh, there was like a briskness to all the dialogue in this game, and it felt weird. While there are different camera angles to help create an illusion, the amount of character poses is severely lacking. It felt like Ellen was scrunched up in terror a lot, and Keats was looking at his glasses even more. I wish there were a ton more variety to liven up the scenes more, especially since there's basically no character animation going on, just posing. Each scene could have been unique. So this is still on my I don't like the dialogue delivery device, and it's that the comic book style is just not it didn't work for me. Um, too many animations. Just like I've seen Ellen look that way so many times, and you know we could switch it up a little bit. Maybe instead of going like this, maybe she's going like this or like this. Like give me some more variety on what these characters are doing. Like I definitely understand that you got to animate all of this stuff, but the better parts of this game for me in terms of how dialogue is being delivered is the actual cutscenes where characters are actually being animated and you're actually seeing the scene unfold in front of you instead of just these cards of characters with a pose and then just like dialogue popping up and stuff like that. I wish the entire game was just as animated as the rest of um, the scenes because the little comic book style just wasn't working for me. Then there's this different style, which is much more in line with a visual novel ish approach, which I think works much better for the game, but also suffers from similar issues just to a smaller degree. Um, so yeah, there's the style where there's a character on this side and there's a character on this side, and then they have the chat bubbles in between. And like I felt that was a better approach than the comic book style. The dialogue tended to be more in depth, more uh, I'm gonna say drawn out, but not in a negative connotation. Like they just had more words to say because the text boxes actually allowed for more words to be said. And I think those scenes just worked better. Uh, but, there was still a limit to what could be said. And, you know, that particular dialogue delivery device is not always uh, foolproof either. Moving away from that, this implementation of characters approaching the same story from different angles hasn't been hitting the mark for me lately. Aside from a different angle, the story for the first 6 chapters is effectively close enough to be identical. The gameplay between the chapters attempts to offer variation, but doesn't do it in a way that is satisfying for me. Some examples of that: still visiting the same worlds with the same configuration of NPCs. Some are more in depth, such as Ellen getting more areas in the fairy realm than Keats, but they largely felt the same. Or enemies are mostly the same, but those enemies just have different abilities you're using. This I can understand from like a development point of view, but it does kind of suck to just come across the same enemies and they're more or less doing like the same attacks and stuff like that, but the attacks that you get are different. And that was pretty I don't want to say like pretty disappointing, but like it it added an element of dissatisfaction And obviously, you can't create 20 new creatures per path or whatever. But I think that's where you kind of build, like, if you're going into this with two paths, I feel like making those two paths completely different is the way to go. I would have much rather this game be Ellen goes to the fairy world, the water world, and the war world, and Keats goes to the realm and like whatever other places that I'm forgetting. Um, like they each have their separate worlds with their separate creatures and their separate folks and things like that, and they capture their own things, and like their gameplay is not necessarily identical. They don't have to tread the same path. Um, Still on these examples of lack of variation, Ellen's mind capacity bar refills over time, while Keats's recharges uh, all at once after a period of time. Um, yeah, I like effectively these characters are identical to me. Yeah, Keats has like this overcharge of power that's really, really strange, by the way. I don't know why he gets that and Alan gets nothing, but, uh, like, I don't think those characters are different enough. Boss fights are also basically the same, which doesn't make sense when you play through both stories. This one was very weird for me because you have to beat the boss to use or to like get the memories and stuff like that. But you also have to play both paths to to beat the game. So how do these characters fight the same uh I forget what they're called. Are they just called folklore? Like the boss folks, how do you how do you have these characters fight the same ones when they get different things happening for each one beating them? It creates a schism right there that doesn't make any sense. Did you ever use the transform he had? I did. I used it, I believe, twice. I was actually considering using it for that final boss fight with the crows, where you use him for like the phase one. But that phase was relatively easy, that I didn't need to. Plus, Keats's HP didn't necessarily matter for that fight. So like even if I beat it with like 5 HP or whatever, um, it wouldn't affect the next phase of the battle because Ellen would be fighting and I'd be using her HP. You expected him to turn into the glowy guy he was in the cutscene at the start. Uh, I I don't know. I don't know. It was a very strange thing. They mentioned there at that start that he was like her guardian and stuff like that. It was just very, very strange. Let's see. Moving away from all of that, the tutorial for leveling up folks could have been much more helpful. I felt as though I needed to absorb as many folks as possible, but instead there was an entire submenu with objectives that I completely missed. So like this could entirely be on me, but um, I felt like the game gave me the impression that in order to rank up the folks that I had, the only way to do that was to increase their karma. And for some reason they gave me items which I could not figure out the significance of because I it wouldn't even let me use them. But I could uh just capture the same enemies all over again. And so that's what I was operating under for the vast majority of the game. And I don't know what made me delve into that menu a little bit more, the one that I did. But when I finally went there, I was like, oh, this is how it works. Um, and I I think this was one of those scenarios where having an actual full-fledged tutorial is one of those helpful things, because then you don't miss out on this stuff. If you had a couple of slides that was like, boom, here's this menu, then you want to go over here, and then next slide, boom, now we're in this menu, and then this is how you do the upgrade stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be super in depth, but it just has to give enough information so that people know how to play the game well, or better, or not as badly as I did. The hint slash strategy system in the books and collecting pages is generally neat, although I wish there was more clarity. The image alone, or the images alone, can create scenarios where it's unknown how to overcome the challenge. Um, this is basically just me saying that I wish there was some more clarity in it. There's like there's words written in the book. I wish, those were actual real words that you could read, so that you don't have to necessarily rely on the images, because there were plenty of images where I'm just looking at it and I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? The one where there's those three plant guys, and they're just like in the ground and they're chilling, and like one of them's different from the other two. It's like, what do I do with this? Why is this significant to me? Stuff like that. I like the UI for folks, and I really appreciate the different filter sort methods. Very helpful. This was very, very cool, and something I wasn't expecting, and something that I kind of stumbled upon. Um, I like how they handle the way that you can go to get different folks. You have the information about what they do at the bottom. You have all these like bars that you cycle through, and you can see what they are. Um, eh, I When I look at it, I see all the different ways that it could have been completely annoying and obnoxious, but instead it was pretty quick and quite snappy, and like the load in afterwards was a little strange, but like excluding that, I really liked how they approached the UI for it and the implementation. For combat, um, I don't think I necessarily give my overall thoughts on the combat, but I I would have to say that I'm not as much of a fan of the combat. Um, and I guess one of the reasons for that is I wish it was more flowy. As an example, every ability seems to have some amount of end lag to it, where after using something like a dodge, you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can do anything. This makes combat less appealing when that value is as high as it is on some abilities, because sometimes I'm getting hit because of it. So uh, when there are different ways to make action games, and end lag is a very good way to tell a player that, like, hey, this move is good for this specific instance, and it's usable at like this window of time. But there's also this extra added section where, like, you can get punished for it. And uh, there are some games that don't have any end lag. There are some games where you can cancel end lag. Gujion 3, for example, you can cancel I think basically anything. And for me, like that makes the game super fun because you're just dashing all over the place. You know, you're throwing an attack. And like, sure, there are situations where, you know, you're about to land an attack and then you dodge out of the way and you don't land that attack. But like, that's like the price you pay, I guess, for having a system like that. And, you know, systems like that, you know, they're very fast paced. This game, it's not necessarily that fast paced. So you're probably not going to be able to do uh, things like that. But if you could cancel end lag somehow, such as with the dodge or upgrades or even another folk, I feel like that would help the combat out immensely. Um, there's just way too many times where I activate a folk and then I have to sit there for an extended period of time and like there's things happening all around me and I'm getting attacked and stuff like that. And it's just kind of annoying. So if there was like a folk where their only purpose was to allow you to dodge and cancel out any of like the end lag or something like that, and you know it's on a cooldown or whatever, that would be fantastical. I would have used it the entire game. Probably overpowered, but you know, it makes the game more fun. I just thought of something that I thought I had written down, so I didn't mention it. And now I'm learning that I don't have it written down, so life is hard. Oh, no, it's right here. The character isn't immune when in the process of absorbing folks. It can be very frustrating to get knocked out and have to start all over again. This was omega annoying. Like of of all the things that I did not like about the mechanics or the gameplay of this game, this is definitely top three, probably. Um, it's it's kind of a struggle to go through the capturing or the absorbing of the folks there. Some of them just require a lot of effort, and to to be in a situation like I have been, where you're just like one controller shake or whatever away from capturing it, and then you get knocked out, and then you have to fight the enemy again, get it vulnerable, and then do it again, and with the chance of it you being knocked out again, it's just annoying. You know what would have been really great is if you could knock out the enemies that needed to have those special interactions with the absorption, if you could capture multiple of them at the same time, because then I could knock them all out and then capture all of them at the same time, just like all the other folks. That would be wonderful. You don't even have to um, make it crazy. You know, maybe you could only do that for the same type or something like that, the same creature. I have an eyelash in my eye and it is killing me because I rubbed my eye. It was in there this morning. Life is hard. So yeah, that super, super annoying. Um, and last thing for the combat, the customization was cool. I liked how different enemies were more susceptible to different elements. I liked that there were uh, similar attacks, but like a lot of them were different. They had different use cases for them. Um, I liked that some of them offered like vertical attacks, while other ones were like long range. Like there was a nice bit of variety of the folks that you could use and how you could use them, and I think that's great. One of the coolest things that you can do in an action kind of combat is to kind of build your own character and and choose what abilities you feel are most fun or most appropriate for the situation. And I think this game accomplishes that. For dungeons, I don't have anything for dungeons. Cardinal Sins, I don't think there's anything for Cardinal Sins. There is actually escort missions in this game, so maybe let's put that in there. Escort missions. What are you doing? For miscellaneous sound and music, I wasn't that crazy about the music in this game. Disregarding the strange music that came out the end. I I the music was, I don't want to say it was atmospheric. I want to say that the music was uh I don't really know what I want to say about the music, but I wasn't necessarily a fan. But I'll still listen to the soundtrack, for Level Up This Place. Maybe what I heard was, just the way, sometimes when you hear it in the game, it doesn't work for you. But when you hear it outside the game, it's the bomb diggity. We'll see. For voice acting, I thought the voice acting was pretty good. I think everybody did their thing. For graphics, I thought the graphics were solid. I don't necessarily like the aesthetic necessarily. Um, like the worlds in of themselves within the netherworld, like those looked great. The town, not so much. Uh, you know, dark colors, browns, dark blues, the grays, the blacks. Like, it's one of the reasons why I got this like horror feeling from it. It's because it's like, okay, y'all using these colors. For others, the game worth recommending. Interestingly enough, I could actually see myself recommending this game to people that want to play a different kind of style of action game. I think this game does succeed with its action combat elements. Um, it may not be as fun as it could be, but it's still successful in that. I don't think the story is very interesting, but then again, the game is just 20 hours or so. So, like, I could see myself recommending this game. If the developer is watching, I don't necessarily think that I have much else to elaborate on that I haven't already said. For the most part, like it's one of those scenarios where I don't I don't think that I would ever see myself putting myself in the position of wanting to play this game again. Um, and that's primarily because it the game is kind of structured on the mystery aspect of it. But that being said, like I feel like at the end of the day, the game set out to do what it wanted to do. Um, I I definitely believe that. Uh, it may not be a game, to stand the test of time, but it's it's certainly more than adequate. And would I want a sequel? It's probably too late for a sequel for this one, but we were just talking earlier about all these games that uh, came out, sequels out of nowhere. So um, I I would probably not pay a lot of attention towards the sequel until it comes out. Maybe I'll watch some streams of it or something like that. I don't see myself buying it on release or within like several months of the release, though. Yeah, that's basically all I got for folklore. Just to reiterate my overall thoughts, I thought the game was, it was all right. That's basically where I stand with it. I guess at some point I'll probably have to uh, figure out where it goes on the Pantheon scale for these types of things. But I'm not that far in the Pantheon. Um, let's see what happens here when I move past the end screen. All right, before I call it quits, mentioned before that there was an opportunity where I could go back to Doolin and talk and see if maybe Suzette is there. I'm going to take that opportunity, and I want to see if I can get some answers on why Suzette just, straight up killed two people for what felt like no freaking reason. Another happy ending? Was this a happy ending? You know how many people died? Like, everyone in this village is dead. Nope, she gone. You have the same. Oh, okay, Suzette's in the church. Okay. I don't know. First of all, I don't know how Suzette got into the netherworld, by the way. They glossed over that. I forgot about that, too. Second of all, right, how did Keats, if you think back to that scene, Keats launched her backwards. How did Keats do that? And also, she's still knocked out, man. Come on. All right. I guess there's nothing for Suzette. So we just take it at face value that she's like, yeah, I'm just gonna kill two people because that's how we do, I guess. All right, well, that's gonna wrap it up for me for today. Today is Thanksgiving, but I'm working today. I'm also working tomorrow. I don't necessarily like starting new games on Friday, so I'm probably just going to take Friday off. And we'll be back Monday, 7 a.m. Pacific, to figure out all of the great Black Friday and Cyber Monday purchases. Gotta tell you, I've already spent a lot of money yesterday. I spent some top dollars on something, and then I watched a YouTube video and saw something else that I liked, but it was it was like $200. But if I just upgraded the top dollar bundle that I got before, it was only $100 more to get that, and then like 60 other things. So I was just like, all right, I guess I'm spending $300. So silly stuff. Anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. See ya the next time I see you. Peace.